What exactly does it mean to make a grade pop? Ask 10 different people and you're going to get 10 different answers. And yet that's a move that we all want to have in our back pocket as colorists, whether it's something that our client asks for or a direction that we feel like is appropriate for a given project. We all are going to encounter the need to make the grade pop at some point. That's what we're going to be talking about today, strategies for making our grades pop. But before we do that, we do need to come up with some sort of shared focused definition for what exactly we mean when we say that. I'm going to give you my definition. Making it pop is essentially about maxing out the eye-catching characteristics of the image, eye-catching aspects of the grade, but without going so far that the image starts to look weird. Simple enough, right? We want to max things out. We really want to make an eye-catching image, but not in such a way that someone looks at it and goes, oh, a colorist turned it to an 11, or they go, oh, why is there an artifact over there? Or why is there hard clipping down there? We want to avoid those extremes, but we want to push things right up to that edge, just shy of those extremes. That's my definition. That is the premise that we are going to be working from when we get into making our grades pop here inside of Resolve in just a moment. Before we do, if you are new to the channel, welcome. My name is Cullen. I'm a colorist. I love color grading and I love talking about color grading. I do tons of both here on the channel. I do 2 new videos every week and we do a live Q&A session every Friday where we talk about the subjects that we've been exploring in that week's videos. So if you are into color grading, if you want to learn more about the color page inside of DaVinci Resolve, I definitely encourage you to subscribe. Definitely turn on those notifications so that you can stay in the loop on all the cool color grading stuff that we're doing here on the channel. Let's get into Resolve and talk about making these grades pop. So what are we looking at right now? I have a timeline of images of this luthier doing his thing, making a guitar, and we're going to make this grade pop. What have I done thus far? Because if we look at these images, they actually look somewhat reasonable for my display right now, don't they? Here's what I've done thus far. I've gone ahead and set up my overall color management. That's the first thing that I always do at the beginning of any project. That's simply a matter of taking what the camera saw and transforming it into what the display can show. If you're not familiar with color management or you need to brush up on it, lots of good content here on the channel where you can do so. You can check out my DaVinci Wide Gamut Workflows series in particular, where I will show you the exact color management settings that I'm using here today. That's number one. I've got that color management in place. Number 2, I've gone ahead and set up a template node graph here for every one of my shots. These nodes right now are totally empty. They're not doing anything. You can see as I hit Option D, nothing is happening. This is just a template structure for me to fill out as I start working my way through my shot-by-shot grade in just a moment. And the last thing that I'm always going to do at the beginning of every color grade that I do is to set up an overall look. That's something that we are going to do together right now because that's actually the first of the 3 strategies that I want to suggest to you for making your grades pop. If you want to make your grades pop, you want to incorporate a look that supports that creative agenda. So you want to have your grades already popping as much as you can get them to before you even begin grading, right? Stronger foundation means you can go further when you are grading. So we're going to go over to the timeline section of our node graph here and build out a look in just a moment. But before we do, we're going to take kind of a non-standard, an unusual step. You might have noticed as I'm starting to flip through these images that most of them feel kind of open and almost overexposed, right? That's actually a great thing because these images have been what's called exposed to the right in order to avoid noise on the floor of the camera sensor. So it's actually great because it's going to net us a stronger, cleaner image, but it means that we're going to need to trim exposure back before we have kind of like a balanced, centered image to work off of. So I'm actually going to cheat a little bit and I'm going to trim my exposure just a hair before we build that overall look because it's going to allow us to have better context for building that look. So here's how it's going to go. Let's go to shot number 1. I'm going to go to my exposure node and do something close to what I'm going to be doing in a moment anyway. I'm just going to start with it where I would normally start with my look just to get a more centered exposure. Same thing on shot number 2. I'm just going to trim that in like so. Shot number 3, same thing. And in fact, if I was really feeling lazy, which I am, I could go to shots 5 through 10. I'm going to tap shot 5, hold down shift and click shot 10. And now I'm going to middle click on shot number 4. And it's asking if I want to replace those grades, and I'm going to say yes. And all this is doing, actually I take that back. We're going to middle click on shot number 1 because that's where we did our exposure trim. I'm going to hit replace. And because all we care about right now is just getting a better viewing context for setting up our look, it doesn't have to be perfect. We've just pasted what we did on shot number 1 onto all these shots to get a better reproduction of what the image is ultimately going to look like. With that in place, let's now go over to the timeline section of our node graph where we are going to build our look. And the way we're going to do this today is using a couple of components from the Pro Pack of my Voyager LUT Pack that I released earlier this year. So here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to start with a palette foundation. Let's go up here, and I think I want to try out Mars. That's just going to give me some denser reds in particular, and you can see how it's kind of like altering my color palette, and it's giving me more pop right out of the box, right? Skin tone is deeper. Those red accents on the wall in the background are deeper. The separation, the color contrast between our luthier's shirt and those red elements is greater. So this is a win already. I'm going to label this as we go. So let's call this palette F. And I just want to point out that's not something that's just happening on this shot. That's happening on all these shots. We're just getting a little closer to a more popping reproduction without even having to grade individual shots. So that's a win. Here's the next thing I want to do. I'm going to do a new serial node, and I'm going to go to my tone modifiers, and I want to take a look at Electra. I think that's going to work really well for us. Same thing. We're just getting a little more pop out of the image. In this case, we're getting some cool shadows and warm highlights. I like what I'm seeing on his hand there. If we go back to this wide, I really like what that's doing. We're just starting to get some more pop without even having graded individual shots yet. So for this, we're going to label this node Tone M. And these are the only 2 components of my Voyager LUT Pack that I want to use today. Just these 2 are doing exactly what I want. And the only adjustment I'm going to make now is on Tone M. I'm going to go here and set my key output gain to a 0.65 because I feel like I want just a little bit less than the full strength for that adjustment. So that's strategy number 1. Get a look in place. Whether it's using Voyager or something else, I don't care. But get a look in place that is starting to chip away at your agenda of making the grade pop. And that's really the theme that we are going to start to see emerge today for overall strategy for making our grade pop is you want to be chipping away at that agenda at every turn, at every opportunity. So it's not a matter of one knob or one adjustment. It's a matter of a series of cumulative adjustments that in the net give you that eye-popping grade that you're looking to get. Okay. So we've got our look in place and we are now ready to begin grading at the individual shot level. And we kind of have a head start already because we've already exposed this image. I'm just going to put fresh eyes on it now that we have a lookup. And I think that looks really great. Let's go to our ratio node next. This is where I'm going to work my contrast ratio. And probably in most of the contrast adjustments that we do in this piece, I'm going to be twisting my contrast to the right. I'm going to be trying to increase my contrast and just max out that eye-popping contrast without things getting crazy garish or overly clipped in the highlights and shadows, okay? So something like that, that's a good healthy hit of contrast. Let me go to my primaries palette so you can actually see it. That's a 1.16. That's a significant contrast bump that I'm making there. And I'm feeling really good about this image. I'm ready to move on. Actually, the last thing that I want to do, I'll take it back, is go over to my balance node and just point out another strategy, the second of the 2 strategies I want to emphasize. And that is to max out your color contrast using your balance. Balance is something that we're going to do in every shot. We're probably going to make some sort of adjustment to the amount of red, green, and blue in the image. If we orient that adjustment around the goal of maxing out color separation, which is going to give us an eye-popping grade, again, that's an opportunity to chip away at our agenda of making an eye-popping grade, okay? So for a shot like this, I'm really just going to nudge things around until, to my eye, my color separation is maxed out. I'm just looking at separation between the various colors in the image and how strongly or weakly they contrast against each other. In this case, not much was needed in order to get to what I would call the optimal position for that, but it's an opportunity that I'm going to be looking out for in every single shot for the rest of this grade because it's a free way of getting a little bit closer to that eye-popping goal that I've got. Let's move on to shot number 2. We've already exposed down a little bit. I'm going to go over here to my ratio node, maybe add some contrast. I think that contrast is actually looking pretty good. Maybe we can go a little bit lower on exposure. I'm pretty happy with that shot. Let's look at shot number 3 here. Trim exposure in a little bit more. Go over to, I think my contrast ratio is good, although maybe we can go a little further. There we go. See, like where I was a moment ago, that was fine. But if the goal is to make the grade pop, I'm going to see if I can get away with putting some more contrast in there, because that's going to help drive that agenda. Okay, let's go over to our balance. Same thing. Let's just see if I can nudge this and get a little bit better color separation. That's not night and day, but I'm getting it by making that little nudge there. So that's a win. Let's go over here to shot number 5. I'm going to skip shot number 4 because it's super similar. That's looking good. I'm going to go a little more open on this exposure. And let's go over here to my contrast pivot. And again, just see how much additional contrast I can get away with in this shot before things start to clip out and look weird. And I'm going to go over to my balance and optimize that as well. Something like that. Okay, so you can kind of see we're making our way through here and taking advantage of built-in opportunities with color balance and contrast to introduce more eye-poppingness to the image. But I want to advance forward now to shot number 8 and take a look at what we can do for this shot. I mean, this looks pretty nice already, right? It's a nice dynamic image. It's got some motion to it. Let's go over to our contrast node, see if we can't get a little more contrast like we've been doing. And I want to try something additional here on this shot. Let's go down to the secondaries branch of the node tree. I'm going to add a new window with, or rather a new node with a circular power window. And we're just going to outline this slick looking guitar here. And I'm going to set the window to be inverted. So we are affecting everything outside of the selection that I've made. And I want to try two things here. We're going to try kind of like a vignette-ish style adjustment where we're just going to knock things down around the instrument. That's making the grade more eye-popping. There's now more spatial contrast in this image than there was before. And I'm even going to press my luck and try going a little further with this and try cooling off in this area. So I'm going to take this same offset adjustment that I'm making and try and bias it towards my blues a little bit. That's a little more stylized. That's a little bit more of an elevated look, but it doesn't look crazy. We're not crashing over the cliff edge that I talked about at the beginning of this video. It's just a little more stylized, and the net here of dropping things down and cooling things off is that we've got a more eye-popping grade. So that's really the third strategy that I want to encourage you toward, is in addition to the built-in opportunities that you have of contrast and balance, you need to be looking for other opportunities in every single shot and saying, hey, in a shot like this, I could draw a window around the object at the center, knock things down, cool things off. And when I do that, I'm going to have both more tonal contrast and more color contrast between these areas and the instrument at the center. So it's another free way of getting more pop, more color contrast into the image. So if you can remember those three strategies when you are working through a grade, create a look that supports the agenda of making the grade pop, take advantage of your fundamentals, your contrast and your balance in particular, and then look for additional opportunities above and beyond that, you're going to be well on your way to making your grade pop. And of course, you're going to need to let your taste govern just how far you can go before you've gone too far. So I hope you guys enjoyed that walkthrough of the way I think about making a grade pop and some of the strategies that I use for doing so when I'm actually grading inside of Resolve. If you like this kind of content, if you like working through color grading in a pragmatic and systematic way and achieving great results quickly, I encourage you to check out my Colorist Career Accelerator. If this is something that you are either considering making a professional career, or maybe you already have and you're looking to get to the next level in your career, whatever your level is today, the Colorist Career Accelerator is about taking you to the next level of your career. And we're going to do in-depth walkthroughs on grading workflow like we did here today, but it's not just grading workflow that we're going to cover. We're going to cover practices for business. We're going to cover practices for negotiation. We're going to talk about gear. We're going to talk about literally everything that you need in a 4-day workshop to set up a thriving color grading business or to grow a color grading business and take it to that next level. So if you're interested, there's a link in the description for today's video to sign up for the waitlist that we have going for the course. Make sure that you're on there. That's the way to find out about when we open up for registration. We're doing this course for the third time now. It has sold out within a couple of days for both of the first times that we've run it. So the very best way to make sure that you are in a position to grab a seat if you decide that it's the right time to grow your career is to be on that wait list and to be getting notified when we do open for registration. So if that's something you're interested in, I hope to see you there. If not, hope you enjoyed this walkthrough today. And again, if you enjoy this kind of content and you want to see more of it, make sure that you subscribe, make sure you turn on your notifications. I'll see you back here for the next pre-recorded video. Or if you want to join for our live show, Grade School, on Friday mornings, love to see you there and answer any questions you've got on the subject that we covered today or anything else that we talk about here on the channel.